Hello, friends. Pastor Ben Pierce here, ready to start a brand new series with you. And if it looks like we're in a little bit of a different surrounding, we are. We're in a brand new production studio. Actually, we're just in an old Sunday school room. That's a storage room that we were able to put some lights and table into. But we are starting a brand new series, and I'm so excited about it. The name of this series is called Who Died and Made You King? And what we're going to be doing is we're looking at the various kings of the Old Testament after Solomon. What I know about my own life is I know the kings from Saul and David and Solomon. They're famous, and you do all the studies on them. But what about some of those lesser known kings? And so what we're going to do is starting at Rehoboam, that's Solomon's son, and we're going to see how the kingdom was divided. And then we're going to look at the kings on both sides for Israel and for Judah. And we'll explain all that as we get into it. And we're going to learn a lot of lessons from these kings' lives. But before we get started, I believe it's important that we do a history lesson. And don't go to sleep on me, I promise. This will be exciting. Start in Genesis 12. There's a man named Abram. God comes and he talks to Abram and he says, go to a land and I'll tell you where to stop. He's 75 years old. Can you imagine the faith it took for a 75-year-old man to pack up everything and just go and not know exactly where you're going? God also made a promise to this 75-year-old man that did not have any children at the time that you're going to be the father of a great nation. And this would be Israel. And that's where we're starting with today. And he promised him the land that he was standing on. Abraham waits and waits for this promise to be fulfilled. And it looks like it's not going to be. But finally, as always, God comes through and fulfills his promise and gives him a son named Isaac. Isaac has two sons named Jacob and Esau. Esau is the oldest, and he sells his birthright to Jacob. Jacob becomes the one who receives the blessing. Now, if you know anything about Jacob, Jacob is a deceiver. He would just as soon climb a tree to tell you a lie as he would to want to stand on the ground and tell you the truth. God does a work on Jacob, and he changes his name to Israel. And then one of those sons, he has 12 sons, and that's going to eventually become the 12 tribes of Israel. One of those sons was named Joseph. Joseph was not liked by his brothers. They beat him, they threw him in a well, and they sold him into slavery into Egypt. Through a long and winding road, Joseph becomes second in command of Egypt. He was imprisoned, he was accused falsely, but eventually God elevates him to second in command of Egypt. God uses Joseph to save the world through a great drought. This great drought causes Israel and his family to move to Egypt. Sorry about that. Fast forward, a Pharaoh that did not know Joseph becomes ruler and enslaves the Israelites. And they're going to stay enslaved for 400 years. God raises up a new leader. His name is Moses. Moses is unlike any leader they've had in the past, talking directly to God. After Moses, he leads them out of the promised land. Then comes Joshua. Joshua is a military man that leads them into the promised land. And you'll see victory after victory, battle after battle. Then after Joshua dies, kind of a vacuum takes place. The people started following false gods. Everyone started doing what was right in their own eyes. And God began to raise up kind of like tribal judges. These are called judges. And out of these would be Samuel was the last one, and he was actually a prophet and a judge, and he was a godly man. But the problem with Samuel is he had two ungodly sons. Samuel had planned that his sons would take over as judges, but the people said, we don't want anything to do with your children. They were wicked, they were godless. We want a king like all the other nations. You know, Moses had warned them about this. If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 14 and 20, he tells them, you're not going to like a king. He's going to tax you. He's going to take this from you. But then we see the people wanted a king. Samuel is told by God to install Saul. Then the second king comes, and he's a good king, is King David. After David, there was a tussle between Ishabeth and Solomon. But the third king was going to be Solomon. Saul, David, Solomon. They're worth studying, and you know them, but this study is going to take off from right after when Solomon dies. Now, this is kind of a hard study because there's going to be some kings that they reign for 2 years. One might have reigned for a couple of months. And so you don't really have much to go from, but we can learn some things, and we'll try to go through. We may not touch on all the kings, but we'll touch on all those that are important. We're going to learn from their victories. We're going to learn from their defeats. We're going to learn from crazy decisions they made. We're going to learn how sin infiltrates and causes a nation to stumble. Most of these stories are found in 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. The Kings, the book of Kings was written first. Both Israel and Judah are covered there. Chronicles really focuses mostly on Judah, the southern kingdom, or the Davidic line of the kings. Israel is mostly ignored. Judah has some good kings throughout the mix. Here's the sad thing. The northern kingdom, Israel, had none, zero. All of their kings were evil. You're going to find out about wars and coups and scandals. It's going to be an exciting study. I'm looking forward to it. Historical, but it's spiritual as well. But one of the key lessons that we need to know as we go into